be not allowed to disturb other people. You have to make sure that it's not going to contaminate. It's not going to cause earthquakes or wreck buildings or whatever, right?
But who would enforce that?
The government. Yeah.
Right. To what extent, in the worldview that you are proposing, to what extent will the government have the right to interfere?
I think so. The government has a right to interfere whenever force is being initiated against another, right? So, if I hit you right now, then
that would be the criminal law, though.
Yeah.
So, to what extent are you talking about in terms of government interference?
With like gas and stuff like that?
Are we talking about purely trade? Why are you giving me that?
I've got two with you already.
So I think as long as you're free and there's no force being initiated against
Sorry, who would determine the definition of free?
Well, I think the to me, freedom in a political context is just absence of force.
No, freedom in the context of the government and the individuals. Who would determine the definition?
I think it's absence of force, and it's up to the government to...
That's you as an individual.
It has to be enshrined
If
in the
I as an
Constitution.
individual has an opposite definition, who is going to be the determinant force?
So then you would have to revert back to whatever the Constitution is of the
But
state.
the Constitution itself is what forms the government.
Yeah.
If the Constitution is defining what the word freedom is, then that word has to then be governed.
So,
and who is going to do that?
I think what you're saying is that this idea of freedom is, at the end of the day, subjective, right? Like you could decide it means something else, and I could decide.
No, in the context of the way we are having this conversation, yes, it would be that. But look, on an objective basis, the definition will come first. How it is going to be put into action is going to have to be determined. The question, and it is a very important one, what is going to be the determining factor? The individual or the state?
The individuals, because the individuals make up the state. It's the idea of, if it was followed truly, it was government by the people and for the people. It is controlled truly by the people, not in terms of a group of a upper level of elected official. It could be an elected official, but it is by the people.
So you're talking about direct democracy.
A direct democracy.
And the closest we have to that is Switzerland.
Constitutional, I would say constitutional.
Constitutional, but direct, meaning like in Switzerland, if they want to, there are referendums on if they should have minarets on mosques, for example. The minutiae of society, they vote on. Should we change our visa rules in terms of immigration? The population would vote on that. That's what I mean by direct democracy.
It's not direct democracy in Switzerland, but it's
close.
it's not that close.
I'm not a political scholar, but I don't just hearing that I don't like it because it's like I think that the rights of the individual first and foremost need to be enshrined in a constitution.
Yeah.
All of this specific political issues about like who to elect as a governor and stuff can be done democratically.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
But again, like understanding the extent of individual rights is the primary problem. Right?
Absolutely, I agree with you. The issue I've always had, and I've considered this myself, when we talk about individual rights, we need explicit definitions.
Absolutely.
And explicit governance.
Okay.
Because without them, I can do what I want. Is that what individual rights are?
They do.
When you said, look, you would draw the line where force comes into play, but that's for your definition, not for mine. Mine includes the use of force.
So I would argue then that you're wrong. I think we can objectively.
You would be entitled to that, but I can equally say you are wrong.
But I think we can come to an objective definition.
Excellent. And then who is going to govern that?
The government.
Now we are back to the government. So to what extent will we allow the government to interfere?
To the extent that it is morally entitled to, based on the idea that individuals have rights.
Excellent, Tom. And whose definition of moral are we going to use?
The objective one.
And who is going to determine that?
A rational individual. Anyone who's rational.
Right. We know that every government has policy departments who will do the necessary research to establish exactly what kind of policies they are going to adopt for the countries. Now, in this particular context, when you say individual rights, that is translating to me as what the government deems to be individual rights are and ought to be individual
we have
rights.
to agree on definitions.
That's what I said.
Okay,
so whose definitions are we going to apply?
So this is coming to a question about epistemology, right? So,
yes?
I mean, how do you define proper concepts, right?
Absolutely.
So, to do that, first you have to have a good metaphysics that says reality exists. Like that's my metaphysics.
It is a given.
It is a given.
Yeah.
That's the axiom you have to base yourself
Absolutely.
on. Like we as individuals are conscious, right? We're consciously evaluating the real world through our senses, right? Do you agree with that? Or do you think like you're seeing a different reality than I am?
No.
We're in the same reality.
We hope we are in the same reality, yeah. Yes.
So, based off of that metaphysics, I think that we can come to an objective formulation, and by objective I mean like evaluating reality, by evaluating like what we are as human beings. I think there is an objective definition of individual rights that's, I mean, if you know like John Locke and stuff, he talked about, I think it was natural law or natural rights, right?
Yes.
And if you look at the Constitution, they say God-given rights. I don't agree with the God-given part. I think there is this idea that the rights are an inherent part of a human being's nature.
Okay.
So, actually, it's hard to say because so human beings are very special in the sense that we're conceptual beings. Like we think in terms of concepts. Animals, they might be able to sense things. They can perceive, but they can't really conceptualize. If they could, they would be able to properly communicate with us. They would be on the same level as us, right?
But is there a possibility that can happen?
I don't think so. But
okay.
That's
a side
issue. Yeah. So because we're conceptual, I think every living thing, its first and foremost prerogative is to live.
Yes.
Like that's its
survival.
Yes, yeah. And we live through our use of our minds, our concepts, right? If we couldn't form concepts,
to the extent that we can.
Yeah. Sure. If we couldn't think rationally as a species, like we don't really have any natural inbuilt tools for surviving other than that. Like we're not especially physically fit. Other animals can easily kill us. We don't, like our senses don't automatically find food for us. That's all through the use of our minds, right?
Yeah.
So, if I hinge my belief on that, like we fundamentally survive through the use of our concepts, then I think the idea of individual rights actually comes from that man should. So I'm going from an is now that we use our reason to ought. So man should be able to use his reason to live, right?
Yeah.
And in a social context between people, and that's where politics comes in. You should not be allowed to inhibit another person's ability to use their mind. Okay. And the way that, and that means not using
Sorry,
force.
Tom, when you say one should not inhibit the freedom of the mind, is that what I just understood?
Yeah, I think the only way to do that is through force, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, on a practical level, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to use my mind to potentially overturn the state, would that be my individual right?
Well, it depends how you mean overturn. Like if by a violent revolution, right? Like with guns and you're killing people and that kind of stuff, right? Is that what you mean?
Perhaps.
Okay, sure.
There are other ways, but let's just deal with this one.
So,
Robert is here, so whenever you want to tag out.
okay, I'm gonna.
All right.
well,
Okay.
let's
Not a
end this
problem at all.
conversation, though.
Yeah.
But he will be.
Not a problem at all.
Then I have to succinctly finish this then. The question was, so is it using your reason? I think it boils down to is it rational to use force against another human being?
Yeah.
And I think it's not, because force is a shortcut to someone's value of their life, right?
Right.
So ultimately you value your life first and foremost. If someone is threatening you with a gun, then you're not allowed to use your reason. You're not allowed to use your rational mind, because the ultimate value is your life. Right?
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think force is the only thing that really shortcuts the use to the rational mind.
Yeah.
But I think everything else is permissible. Like, you're not allowed to use force, but you're allowed to trade with other people. You're allowed to convince them. You're allowed to argue. You're allowed to, if you're overturning the state through a means of voluntary participation, everybody agrees that we should overturn the state, go ahead. If you just go in with a gun to Parliament, then you're using force against other
And if you just go with an idea wholesale, and the idea itself perhaps also has an element of violence included, would that still be my right?
Well, I mean, you're allowed to promote the idea, but actually acting on it with the use of force, I think that's wrong.
And if I promoted the idea to want to overturn the government,
it's tough, because at some point,
will the government interfere?
well, at some point it is a threat of force, which is also, I think.
But the threat is not carried out. So as far as my individual rights are concerned, I'm within.
Well, a threat of force it's tricky, because you're not committing force yet, but
Exactly.
you're basically making a statement that's saying, I intend to use force.
I'm not even intending to. It seems very clear that the implication may be there.
Okay. So
So it is obvious that the government is going to have something to say.
yeah, in more grounded terms, I think you should be allowed to promote communism, right?
Yeah.
And communism necessarily includes that violent revolution at some point, right? But you're not actually allowed to try to act it out, through a violent revolution.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But you're allowed to talk about it.
It's an irony, but it's not a contradiction.
All right.
That's the one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.